hope you enjoyed the last video. So for today, we will be talking about another movie called Austenland. To be honest, this movie is not really a movie with deep meaning or significance, but it is weirdly my go-to movie whenever I'm feeling not so happy in my life. So basically, Austenland is a romantic comedy with a few historical elements in it, and the protagonist is called Jane Hayes. She is a woman in her 30s, and she has been, in her friends' words, addicted with Jane Austen's novel and the time period, which is the Regency era. Well, she is also having sort of a hard time in her life due to her obsession with Jane Austen and the certain time period. So the fictional world seems to have gotten in her way of realizing the truth and allowing her to enjoy the moments in the real life. Therefore, she has become somewhat unlucky in love because she has been meeting men that are somewhat mediocre and who are unable to share her interests for Jane Austen, or those who are unable to appreciate Jane Austen's works or the historical era. Furthermore, the men also insult her because of her age, because they constantly remind her how she is still single while she is in her 30s and she is sort of running out of time. So after she cannot take it anymore, she decides to spend all of her savings for a trip to the so-called Austenland. Austenland is a resort in which guests can experience the daily lives of the Regency era, and all of the modern technologies are unallowed. So she was then assigned the name Miss Jane Erstwhile, and she also quickly befriends another woman called Elizabeth, Lizzie for short. Lizzie is a very wealthy woman, however lacks knowledge in Jane Austen's works or the Regency era itself. During her stay at Austenland, Jane Hayes realizes that she is somehow unable to enjoy her stay as much as she thought she would, and she also found herself caught between two suitors. One of them is the resort's Mr. Darcy, Henry Nobley, and the other is stable boy Mark. Starts her sort of adventure and self-discovering journey throughout her stay in Austenland, and finally coming to the realization that the thing that she really has to face and the world that she is really living in is now, and that is what she has to focus on. Watching this movie for many times, a few themes that I have come to pay attention to. So the three themes are, the first one is certain expectations for men and women in the society, and the second one is the British culture, and the last one is reality and truth versus fantasy and the theatrical. So first of all, what really caught my eye in this film is certain expectations for both men and women. For men, for instance, is they somehow expect men to be like gentlemanlike or chivalrous. For instance, as the resort's Mr. Darcy, Henry Nobley actually performed several like chivalrous acts. For instance, Henry Nobley once picked Jane Hayes up while she was caught in the thunderstorm, and he has also secretly helped Jane when she was in trouble with the so-called modern contraption, which is her mobile phone. And there is also the airport scene in which Henry Nobley actually expresses his true feelings to Jane Hayes and also shows his sincerity. So that sort of makes me feel that there are certain expectations for men, and at the end it is proven that he is the good guy. So it sort of reinforces this sort of concept of how a man should behave. For women, I do feel a little bit stronger about this, and sometimes it makes me feel rather uncomfortable. As mentioned previously, Jane Hayes was continuously reminded of how her time was running out, and it was not only that her colleagues from the modern society are reminding her, but also when she went to Austenland and when everybody is sort of in the theatrical of the Regency era, they are also continuously reminding her that as a woman in her 30s and still single is something to be sympathized about or something to take pity on. During their stay in Austenland, while the men go hunting, the women often stay in the mansion and sew and knit or read. So I think that is also one of the distinct difference between how men and women are sort of expected to act, or how they are often assigned different things from the very beginning. theme is the British culture. However, I do think that the British culture is somewhat different from my personal experiences during my stay in the United Kingdom. However, it is undeniable that the plot of this film actually follows the structure of Jane Austen's novel. So my main observations of British culture in this film is actually, well, first of all, the structure. As some of you might have known or might have watched the movie Pride and Prejudice, the female protagonist Elizabeth Bennet and her love affair, Mr. Darcy, actually didn't get along when they first meet, but it is through their discussions or how they get to know each other more that they actually fell in love with each other. And I think this is also the same case with Jane Hayes and Henry Nobley. I also find that maybe I'm biased, but I think British people tend to use more fancy words, like this is a British thing or not, or maybe just a thing of the Regency era, that people tend to talk in a rather indirect style. I don't know if their style of talking or speaking in a more ambiguous way is to sort of to maintain their courtesy or to maintain their politeness, but I think it does show a certain degree of like wit, especially when they're having arguments. So the third and last thing that I have realized after watching the film is how reality and truth versus the fantasy and theatrical. So in Austenland, people who go to Austenland actually buys like a package, and so every guest is actually assigned a role, and they're also assigned another character, like another actor, to be their love affair to actually fulfill their stay or experience in Austenland. Guests actually experience in Austenland is a fantasy or is a game, and it is not something, especially emotions or relationships, is not something that can be extended into the real world. So in Henry Nobley's words, it is a dangerous game to play. So even before Jane Hayes went to Austenland, she has already been sort of blinded by her imaginations and fantasies for Jane Austen's world and Regency era, and it has actually affected her life that is actually currently happening before her. I think something interesting to note is that when Jane Hayes and Henry Nobley are having an argument about why she remained single, Jane Hayes said, "I'm single because the only good men are fictional." Well, for me personally, I think this is somewhat true. It is also a reflection of how all of us have to be more realistic at times. It's very, very important to sort of draw the line between having hope, dreaming, and expecting something to become true. So that's it for today's video. I hope you have enjoyed it, and before we end, there are 2 questions for you to answer. So first of all, is there a certain time period or a particular country that you like? Or is there fictional worlds that you find appealing? Would you like to spend money like Jane for a theatrical experience? And secondly, if you were Jane Hayes, how do you distinguish reality from fantasy? Henry Nobley said it's a dangerous game. Do you agree or disagree? Thank you for being here today, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.